I want to thank y'all for the opportunity to come speak to you. I intend to speak to you for about 10 minutes or so and be happy to take y'all's questions after that. I'll start with this. You know, many of you have heard me talk about my parents' story. And the reason I reference my parents' story so often about them coming to Louisiana, it still amazes me. They came here 44 years ago in search of the American dream. And the fact that almost 36 years after they got here, a little more than 36 years after they got here, their oldest son could be elected governor, I think is a great testament to just the viability, the vitality of the American dream, and also says a lot about what a great state this is. They didn't know anybody when they got here. My mom came here to go to school at LSU. My dad came here to work. And the reality is that I took two things from their experience. One was this gratitude for the opportunities and blessings we have in this great state and this great country. And secondly was this unwavering confidence and faith that anything is possible, that we should push in our lives to try to do big things. And so I was blessed. I ran for governor, and you know, I was very grateful, and I am very grateful to the people of Louisiana for electing me in 2007. I can't describe any greater honor than getting to be governor of this great state, where I was born and raised, where my children have been born, where Supriya and I want to raise our family. But the reality is our state faced great challenges when I took office. If you go back to 2007, we had a segregated healthcare system. We had an educational system where we actually had graduation rates that were dropping and dropout rates that were increasing. You go back, we were known more for our political corruption than anything. Everybody had their favorite joke about Louisiana politicians. But most distressing, we were the only state in the South where for 25 years we had more people leave Louisiana rather than come to our state. And I talked about that at every campaign stop. What that means is that every one of us had children, grandchildren, friends, family members that didn't live here anymore. You know, after I graduated from Baton Rouge High, I saw many of my friends leave this state never to come back. In my own family, we have seen family members leave. There are family members I will only get to see at Christmas this year because they don't live here anymore. For too many of us, that had become a reality. We had seen our children have to go to Texas, to Georgia to pursue their dreams. So when I ran for governor, I made the commitment that we had to change that. I was running to make big changes, and we've certainly done that. Now, I could talk a lot about process. I want to talk a little bit about results. The reality is that I know that those changes weren't always popular. Change is never easy. I know that a lot of times politicians like to just follow opinion polls, or they like to kiss babies or cut ribbons. I wasn't running to be that kind of governor. I made it very clear to the people of Louisiana that I wanted to be governor so we could make those big changes, so we could bring our children and grandchildren home. I wasn't the kind of guy that was going to just sit here and not rock the boat. Some people didn't like those changes. Some people still don't like those changes, but I would point to the results. The reality is after 25 years of losing our young people, for the last 7 years in a row, we've had more people move into Louisiana rather than leaving our state. We are a top 10 state for job creation. We've had 8 credit upgrades. Our graduation rates have gone up. We've cut the number of failing schools in half. You look at Louisiana today, we've got $60 billion of investment, 90,000 jobs coming into this state. Here in Baton Rouge, you've got IBM downtown. Northeast Louisiana, CenturyLink, our newest Fortune 500 company, added over 1,000 new jobs since I was elected governor. Bentler Steel investing nearly $1 billion in Northwest Louisiana. Sasol spending $8-9 billion in Southwest Louisiana. EA Games here in this state. CG, CSC, and other companies, high-tech and other companies, hiring thousands of our people, investing billions of dollars across our state. Truly, I believe we've created a new Louisiana. Our work's not done, but we've reversed the outmigration. Our work's not done, but we've created more opportunities for our children and grandchildren. Our work's not done, but we did what we said we were going to do. We made the big changes that had to be made. I want to highlight just 4 specific areas. And change isn't always easy, and I know that these changes were tough to make. We started with a special session on ethics. And again, I said we all had our favorite jokes about corruption, but the reality is those jokes weren't funny anymore. LSU had done a survey and tied for first place for the reason that businesses did not want to invest in Louisiana. It was the sense that who you knew was more important than what you knew. And the reality is those ethics laws, those ethics changes weren't easy to implement. They weren't easy to pass, and yet we did them. Moved from the bottom 5 to the top 5 in the Better Government Association's Integrity Index. Went from 44th worst to number 1, the Center for Public Integrity's legislative disclosure list. But we didn't stop there. We also transformed our healthcare system. We used to have a bifurcated healthcare system. Now, if in today's Louisiana we had shown up and said, we're going to build a healthcare system, one set of facilities for people that have insurance and access and another for people that are poor and uninsured, you'd be laughed out of the room. And that's exactly what we had in Louisiana. Every expert said you would never build this system if you were designing a system on a blank sheet of paper, and yet that was the system that we had. Nobody wanted to change it, even though everybody admitted this wasn't the best way to deliver health care. We implemented public-private partnerships. We privatized many of those hospitals. We worked with local private partners. As a result, in Baton Rouge, it used to take 10 days if you were uninsured to get a prescription filled. Now it takes 10 minutes. In Lafayette, it used to take 6 months if you had cancer to see an oncologist. Now they have oncologists on staff. In Lake Charles, if your child had a broken bone, they would transport you to a different city. Now they can treat you locally. We've improved the quality of health care. We've cut the cost for taxpayers by over $100 million. We provided a more sustainable and better platform to train the future health care providers for tomorrow. We've done other things in health care, but then the third thing we did, and this probably excited the most opposition, is we took on education reform. And of all the things we have done, this is the thing that I think will have the most, education reform, I believe, will have the most lasting impact on our state. It used to be 98% of our teachers would get satisfactory ratings in the tenure program. It used to be in Louisiana that 50% of our schools were rated D or F schools. It used to be in Louisiana that our dropout rates were rising, our graduation rates were falling. We changed that. We provided statewide school choice, where the dollars follow the child instead of the child following the dollars. We did course choice, so you can mix and match courses from your public school with private providers. We lifted the cap on charter schools. In New Orleans, over 95% of our kids are now in charter schools. Across the state, we've cut the number of failing schools in half. Our graduation rates are higher than they've ever been before and continue to increase. You look at our improvements on the AP exams, the ACT exams, we're doing better in terms of percentage improvements than other states. And again, I know change is hard and change isn't always popular. The reason this is so important, and I said this in my inaugural address to begin my second term, if we really believe in the American dream, if we really believe that every child in Louisiana can grow up and work hard and do better than their parents, then it is not right, it is not fair to leave a child trapped in a failing school. There were too many children, the quality of their education was dependent on their zip code, the wealth of their parents. There's something un-American about that. The circumstances of a child's birth determines their outcomes as an adult. And I asked and I recommended to the governor-elect that he actually meet with the parents and the students and the scholarship program before they make any decisions about that program, before they make any final decisions, and he agreed to do that. I'm glad that he's doing that. And I'd encourage you, if you have the chance, to go and talk to some of these parents. It is amazing the stories you'll hear about, especially from moms, saying this is the first time their daughters have actually come home with homework, or the first time their sons are wearing uniforms to school, the first time their children are thinking about continuing their education after high school. We made a lot of big changes, but of all the things we've done, I think education reform, again, is one of the ones, but especially the most important one in terms of lasting impact on our state. Fourth and finally, we cut taxes. Yes, and we cut spending. I'm proud of the fact we made a commitment not to grow government, but rather to grow the real world economy. You have a choice to make. You either grow the government economy or the real world economy. We chose to grow the real world economy. Yes, we cut spending, and yes, we cut taxes. Largest income tax cut in our state's history, dozens of tax cuts. We cut the size of our state budget 26%. We cut the number of state employees by 30,000, fewest number of state employees we've had in decades. As a result, again, top 10 state for job creation, highest ever per capita income ranking in our state's history. We have more people working in Louisiana than ever before, earning a higher income than ever before. And I think this is a fundamental choice. You either have to increase the government or increase the real world economy. You can't do both. I could certainly talk at length about other things we've done, but I think these were four of the biggest changes we've made. We've done other things. As I close my remarks, I will say this. I'm proud that we took on the big challenges. I'm proud that we made the big changes, and I'm proud that Louisiana is better off for those changes. It would have been easy simply to coast after our reelection, but we decided that for every day we were privileged to be in this office, we would work hard to make Louisiana a better place to raise a family and to get a good paying job. I'm going to close with three final observations. One is that there's always more work to be done. I'm confident our state will be even stronger 4 years from now. I'm grateful to the people of Louisiana for allowing me to be governor, but I'm also in awe of their resilience and their generosity. I've been governor through hurricanes, through an oil spill, through a national recession. And time after time, I'm amazed at Louisianians' ability to get up. When we get knocked to our knees, to our feet, we don't stay down there. And that doesn't depend on who's in the Capitol. It doesn't depend on who's in the governor's office. That says something about the character of the people of Louisiana. And I want to thank them for the privilege and the opportunity to serve them. The second thing I'll say, and just closing with an observation about my parents, it really would have been, I think, incredible if you could go back in time and tell these this young couple coming to Louisiana from halfway across the world that one day their child was going to be governor of this great state. I don't think they would have believed you. That says something about what an amazing, generous, and just incredible state we have. One of the reasons I ran for governor was I didn't want, you think about this, they came halfway across the world in search of opportunity. They didn't know anybody here. How amazing, but also how awful if within a generation or two, their own children and grandchildren would have to leave the same state that brought them halfway across the world because those opportunities weren't still here. That's what motivated me to run for governor in the first place. But I do want to thank the people of Louisiana. They've been very generous to me and to my family. And one of the reasons I ran for governor is I wanted to give something back. Third and finally, I want to thank the members of the press corps here. It's hard for me to believe it. I've been coming to the press club now for 20 years. When I first started coming here, I was at DHH. Some of you were here, a lot of you weren't. The faces may have changed, but the organizations are the same. And I want to close on a serious note about the role of the Capitol Press Corps and the press in general. I'm grateful for the job that you do. The reality is not my job as governor to like every story you write or every story you broadcast, and that's okay. But as a resident of Louisiana, I'm grateful that you pay attention to state government. I'm grateful that you hold our elected leaders accountable. We should never take for granted that we live in a state and a country where we get to hire and fire our leaders. That's not true everywhere. I've had the chance to sit down individually with some reporters, and I've said this personally, but I want to say this to the group collectively. You know, I've been doing this long enough. I do remember, this isn't meant to be critical of any particular organization, because I understand that we live in a new world of economics, a new world for media companies as well. But I'm old enough, I remember where there was more than one state radio network in the Capitol. I remember where the bureaus had more reporters. I remember when more news organizations had offices in the Capitol. And I want to commend the people that are still here. I know you've got fewer resources than your predecessors, and yet you still do an heroic job and an important job every day. Thank you for that. And again, I'm grateful. In a few weeks' time, I'm going to be one of those private citizen, private sector taxpayers, and I'll be reading the papers and watching the TV and listening to the radio and looking online, and I'm grateful that I'll be able to get that information, that somebody's holding our government accountable. So I mean it. Thank you for the job you've done, not only these last 8 years, the last 20 years, but the job that you continue to do. It's an important one. And again, that doesn't mean I have to like everything you write, but I'm glad that you do it. I will close there, and I'll be happy to take your questions. Well, so I think if you actually look at the objective, if you actually look at the disclosure requirements, if you actually look at the conflict of interest requirements, if you actually look at the disclosure requirements, not only for elected officials but appointed officials, Louisiana still ranks very, very well. Number one, or in the top tier compared to other states. We'll be happy to get you those rankings. I know there are a number of subjective rankings. I know there are a number of... No, I know, but if you look at CPI's disclosure rankings, which are actually based on objective forms, if you actually look at the forms that legislative officials have to fill out, if you actually look at the forms that appointed board members have to fill out, different groups do other rankings that are based on more subjective. I know, for example, CPI does one ranking that's based on interviewing local journalists and reporters. If you actually look at the objective rankings, if you actually look at the disclosure forms, look at the conflict of interest laws, you actually look at the changes we put in place, Louisiana does rank at the top, again, either number one or in the top tier. Is there more work to be done? Sure. And if the next administration discovers there are additional reforms they want to make, that's fine. But we've not backed down, we've not watered down any of those reforms made in 2008. We've strengthened those. If you look at the objective evaluations, If you actually look at the requirements, for example, in terms of what lobbyists have to fill out when they come to the Capitol, if you look at before 2008, there weren't limits, for example, on the meals. There weren't limits on the tickets. Before 2008, there were much looser restrictions on public officials being able to work for themselves and being able to serve the public interest. Before 2008, it wasn't as easy or possible in many cases for the public to know what their elected and appointed officials, how they were making their money or where their sources of income were. All of that has changed. I think there's been a dramatic change in the ethics laws and the atmosphere for the better, and several objective analyses have shown that. And again, I know there are a bunch of subjective rankings based on surveys, but if you actually look at the objective forms and laws, Louisiana is in a much stronger place. But I'm not saying that we're ever done. And if there's more improvements that need to be made, certainly I would encourage the next legislature and the next administration to move forward and not water down the reforms that we put in place. I think it's undeniable that we're in a much stronger place than we were 8 years ago. And I think that's reflected not only in the changes in the laws, but I think if you also go and talk to business leaders. Remember, this was done to change the corruption, but also change the perception amongst business leaders. We rank higher in every single business-friendly ranking that is done in the country. And in many of those, we're the most improved state. We went from being the bottom to the top. So if you actually go and talk to those folks that are thinking about investing in our state, I think you've seen a dramatic improvement.
What about deliberative privilege?
I'm talking about executive privilege. Well, as you know, we actually signed a law in this session that actually makes even more of those records public. So we've actually signed a law in this last session that will actually narrow even further the things that are kept under executive privilege. I do think, and I signed that law, and I'm happy and I'm proud that we signed that law. I do think it's important for the next governor that he is able, or in a future governor, he or she is able to get frank advice from their advisors and able to be able to get that advice and make good decisions for the state. Now, obviously, and there's a precedent for executive privilege at the federal and state level as well. The president has something similar. I do think the public has a right to know, but I think that also has to be balanced with making sure that the next governor has the ability to get honest, candid advice based on the best recommendations. Whenever tax dollars are being spent, certainly that needs to be, those records are made public, and obviously there are, I think the public also has a right to know. And again, we have signed a law shrinking the scope of some of the executive privilege. Well, you asked several different things. First, on TOPS, look, I know there are folks that want to cut TOPS every year. I think that's a mistake. I'm proud that we've invested in TOPS every single year, kept it fully funded. I think it's been an important program to help literally hundreds of thousands of students be able to afford college, go to college. So you're right, there are folks that always want to cut TOPS. I think that's a mistake. I think it's important to continue to fully fund and invest in TOPS, and I'm proud that we did that. I saw this as the head of the University of Louisiana system when I worked in higher ed. Not only is it good to help students pay for education, higher education, I think it also encourages students to take more advanced courses in high school and plan on continuing their education. Louisiana ranks as one of the 10 best states when it comes to student debt, when it comes to the numbers of students that have student debt as well as the amount of debt they've got, I think in large part due to TOPS. And so I think it'd be a mistake to cut TOPS. You mentioned Medicaid, the growing cost of Medicaid. Thanks to Bayou Health, the increases in per capita Medicaid spending in Louisiana have actually slowed down and are actually doing better than they have historically. It's better than in other states. One of the great success stories, 1,000 babies are now going home on time instead of going to the NICU unit. We're saving taxpayers over $100 million for all the changes through Bayou Health and other changes in Medicaid. But even more importantly, that's 20,000 days that babies aren't spending in NICUs. Studies have shown low birth weight babies, or not only do low birth weight babies have immediate health care challenges, they've got developmental and other challenges as well. Talk about the importance. You think about that every year, you're talking about 1,000 children. Now they're doing better because of the fact that they're born at full weight, at full term, as opposed to spending their first days on this earth in a hospital unit. And you think about the lingering health care implications that could have for those children. So I think TOPS has been a great success story. You know that I'm opposed to the expansion of Medicaid in large part due to the cost pressures other states that have done that have faced. Other states that have expanded Medicaid have seen unexpected increases in cost. I think that is a cautionary tale for several reasons. I've opposed the expansion of Medicaid. When you look at the portion of the state's budget that's gone to healthcare and Medicaid, it has continued to grow over the last several years, multiple administrations. I believe if Louisiana were to expand Medicaid, that would only exacerbate those fiscal challenges. I think if the state expanded Medicaid, you'd see more pressure on higher ed spending, on road spending, on taxes as well. In terms of our fiscal policies, look, we've had 8 credit upgrades. We've balanced our budget every year that we've been here in office without raising taxes. I know the easiest thing to do is simply to raise taxes. I disagree with that. I think the reality is when you raise taxes, you're taking money away from businesses, from Louisiana families. So I disagree with those that say that's the easy path. The path of least resistance is you simply raise taxes. I think that'd be a mistake. So I think the fact that we're leaving behind, we balanced the budget, we're growing the private sector economy, I think that's the right fiscal path forward. It was a deliberate path. We chose that path intentionally. Now I know other people have other ideas. They'd rather grow government, raise taxes. I think that'd be a mistake. Melinda? A couple of things. I'm glad that both agencies reaffirmed, I mean, they chose not to change our credit ratings. And so I should say, reaffirm's got a technical meaning, so let me take that back. They chose not to change our credit ratings, which I think is a very good thing. Again, they're the highest they've been in decades. Our credit ratings have increased 8 times. Look, the budget's always a compromise with the legislature. We've always proposed making more reductions than the legislature has wanted to do. Many in the legislature don't want to make cuts until you absolutely have to. And this latest round was another example. We went to legislative leadership. We wanted to make additional reductions. They recommended, they didn't want to do that. They preferred, for example, to use rainy day funds instead of making additional reductions. It was a negotiated compromise. We didn't get everything we wanted, but the good news is we balanced a budget. We didn't raise taxes. We've done that every year that we've been here. The next administration, the next legislature will have some decisions to make on whether they want to continue that approach. I would recommend that. I think if you continue to balance the budget by making efficiencies and reductions, that's a better path than the alternative. And so I'm proud that we balanced the budget without raising taxes. Every budget we have signed has always been the result of compromise. I'll give you an example. Every year we've worked with legislators, sometimes those have included, for example, the governor-elect, but other legislators as well, at the end of the process that will say, and you've sometimes covered these stories where in the last days of session, it's happened the last several sessions, the last days of session, they'll say, all right, Governor, we'll agree to this budget, but we want more spending in these areas. We've never gotten to the end of a session where the legislators have said, Governor, we actually want to take more spending out. We want to cut spending. It's always been, hey, we want to increase spending in certain areas. So I'm proud of the fact that we're leaving a balanced budget that didn't raise taxes. I'm proud of the fact that we're leaving the highest credit ratings in decades. I'm proud of the fact we've been a top 10 state for job growth. I think a lot of the folks are waiting to see. The next governor has said he wants to make big changes. I think a lot of them are giving him time and want to wait and see what he does.